There are moments in life when humiliation is so complete, so public, that it stops being a personal experience and becomes a spectacle. Emily stood at the altar in a dress that cost more than her rent, surrounded by witnesses with their phones raised, waiting for the words that would change her life. But when the moment came for her groom to say yes, he said something else entirely. And in the silence that followed, as 120 people watched her world collapse, a man no one had noticed until that moment put down his mop and stepped forward with an offer that would expose secrets no one was prepared to hear. This is not a story about rejection. It's a story about the calculated cruelty that hides behind closed doors, about the manipulation that wears the mask of love, and about the unexpected places we find the courage to reclaim our own voices. What happened at that altar was only the beginning. What came after would reveal a truth so disturbing that it would force everyone who witnessed that moment to question what they really saw. If you want to know how a wedding day disaster became the exposure of a pattern that destroyed lives, stay with us until the end. Like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories that reveal the uncomfortable truths hiding beneath perfect surfaces. The church smells like lavender and old wood, like every other wedding Emily had ever attended as a guest. But today, she stands at the altar, and the scent makes her nauseous. She tells herself it's nerves, normal bride nerves, the kind everyone has. Her dress fits perfectly. She'd tried it on 17 times in the last 3 months, each time holding her breath as the seamstress adjusted invisible seams, murmuring reassurances that meant nothing. The fabric is expensive, imported, chosen not by Emily but by Marcus's mother, who said it would work with her frame. Those words, her frame, as if Emily were a painting that needed the right border to be acceptable. The church is fuller than it should be. Marcus said it would be intimate, 50 people, maybe 60. But there are at least twice that many, phones discreetly raised, capturing angles, recording moments. Emily can feel their eyes like weights on her shoulders, her waist, her hips. She keeps her chin up because that's what you do when you're supposed to be happy. Marcus stands beside her, handsome in his tailored suit, his jaw tight in a way she's learned to recognize. It's the expression he wears when his colleagues make jokes he doesn't find funny, but laughs at anyway. When his mother criticizes the restaurant Emily chose. When they're in public and she reaches for his hand and he takes it, but holds it loosely, like something he might need to drop quickly. Pastor Williams is speaking. The traditional words, the ones Emily heard at her sister's wedding 4 years ago, back when she still believed in the possibility of this moment for herself. Back before she understood that love, for someone who looks like her, comes with conditions. Asterisks, fine print. Do you, Marcus Allen Pritchard, take this woman? Emily's heartbeat fills her ears. She can feel sweat gathering at the small of her back, beneath the dress that cost more than her monthly rent. She focuses on Marcus's face, searching for the man who told her 6 months ago that she was beautiful, that he didn't care what anyone thought, that they were building something real. The pause comes where there should be words. 1 second, 2, 3. The silence spreads like spilled water, seeping into every corner of the sanctuary. Emily watches Marcus's throat move as he swallows. His eyes meet hers for a fraction of a moment, and in them she sees something worse than doubt. She sees relief. The relief of a man who has finally given himself permission to do what he wanted to do all along. His hand slips from hers, not violently, almost gently, the way you might release a bird you never intended to keep. I can't. His voice is quiet, but carries perfectly in the acoustic space. I'm sorry, Emily, but I can't do this. He doesn't say why. He doesn't need to. Everyone in the church understands immediately. They've understood since the invitations went out, since the engagement photos were posted, since Marcus first introduced his fiancée to his parents and watched his mother's smile freeze and fracture. Emily's body goes numb. She's aware of sounds, gasps, whispers, the rustle of people shifting in pews. But they seem distant, as if happening in another room. She should move, she should say something, but her legs won't obey, and her throat has closed around words that no longer matter. Pastor Williams is talking, trying to salvage something, his face red with the kind of second-hand embarrassment that makes people want to leave rooms. Marcus's mother has stood up, already moving toward her son, her hand outstretched as if to guide him away from a mistake, not the mistake of leaving, but the mistake of agreeing to this wedding in the first place. People are filming. Of course they are. Emily can see the phones now, no longer discreet, openly pointed at her frozen figure in the expensive dress. Tomorrow she'll be a story, a cautionary tale, the fat girl who thought she could have a fairy tale. In the back of the church, near the side entrance where the late arrivals and the overflow guests stand, there's a figure that no one has paid attention to until now. A man in a grey uniform, the kind worn by maintenance staff and janitors, with a name tag that reads David in faded letters. He's holding a mop, and there's a yellow bucket beside him filled with dirty water that smells of industrial cleaner and disinfectant. He's been cleaning the vestibule during the ceremony, trying to finish before the recessional, before the guests would pour out into the space he was responsible for maintaining. But he stopped when Marcus said, "I can't." Stopped with the mop still dripping, creating a small puddle on the tile floor. David is looking at Emily with an expression that doesn't match anyone else's in the church. Not pity, not shock, not the uncomfortable relief of people grateful this isn't happening to them. He's looking at her like he's witnessing an execution. Like he understands in some fundamental way that what just happened wasn't a rejection. It was something colder, something calculated. And in his eyes, for just a moment before Emily's vision blurs with tears, she refuses to let fall. There's recognition of a truth no one else has voiced yet. That this humiliation, orchestrated in front of 120 witnesses with their phones and their whispers and their barely concealed satisfaction, wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. Pastor Williams clears his throat, a sound that echoes through the church like a small cough of desperation. He's officiated 43 weddings in his 15 years at St. Margaret's, but he's never had one fall apart at the altar. He shuffles through his notes, as if the answer to this disaster might be written somewhere in the margins, some protocol for when the groom decides honesty matters more than kindness. Perhaps we should, everyone, if we could just... His words trail off because there's nothing to say that won't make this worse. Marcus is already moving toward the side door, his groomsmen forming a protective barrier around him, as if Emily might chase after him. She hasn't moved, hasn't spoken. She stands in her expensive dress like a monument to hope that arrived at the wrong address. His mother reaches him first, her hand on his shoulder, her voice too loud for the intimacy she's attempting. "You did the right thing, sweetheart. Better now than later." The words carry across the sanctuary, and Emily feels them land like stones. The guests are no longer pretending to be respectful. Conversations bloom in clusters. Phones are still raised, capturing every angle of her humiliation. A woman in the third row, someone Emily doesn't recognize, is speaking into her phone in a stage whisper. "You should see this. Oh my God, I told you this would happen." Emily's maid of honor, Jessica, finally breaks from her paralysis and moves to Emily's side. She takes Emily's elbow, trying to guide her away from the altar, away from the stairs and the cameras and the growing buzz of commentary. But Emily's feet won't cooperate. Some part of her brain has decided that if she doesn't move, this isn't real. If she doesn't leave the altar, the ceremony hasn't truly ended. Come on," Jessica whispers, her voice cracking. Let's get you out of here. But before Emily can force her body to respond, before she can begin the long walk down an aisle that was supposed to end in joy, a voice cuts through the chaos, not loud, but clear, firm in a way that makes people stop talking and turn. "I'll marry her." The words come from the back of the church, from the man in the grey uniform who was supposed to be invisible. David sets down his mop with deliberate care, the handle resting against the wall, and takes a step forward. Then another. The church falls into a different kind of silence. The whispers stop. The phones remain raised, but the fingers hovering over screens pause, unsure what they're recording now. David walks down the center aisle with the kind of steady purpose that suggests he's thought about this, that these aren't words thrown out in a moment of impulse or misguided heroism. His work boots make soft squeaking sounds on the polished floor. His uniform smells of cleaning chemicals and sweat. He's not handsome in the way Marcus is handsome. His face is weathered, lined around the eyes, his hair starting to thin at the crown. He looks like someone who works with his hands, who understands the value of things that can be fixed and things that can't. When he reaches the front of the church, he doesn't look at the pastor or the scattered groomsmen or Marcus's outraged mother. He looks at Emily, only at Emily. "I know you don't know me," he says, his voice quiet enough that people in the back pews lean forward to hear. "But I know you. I've worked here for 3 years, cleaning this church every Sunday and Wednesday. I've watched you come here, sometimes by yourself, sitting in the back during evening prayer. I've seen you volunteer at the food bank downstairs, carrying boxes that were too heavy but you wouldn't ask for help. I've heard you sing when you thought no one was listening." Emily's breath catches. She doesn't remember any of this, doesn't remember seeing him, noticing him, acknowledging his existence in any meaningful way. But the details are too specific to be lies. "You deserve better than this," David continues. "Better than someone who makes you feel grateful just for being chosen. So if you're willing, I'll stand here with you. I'll say the words he couldn't say. Not because I'm trying to save you, but because maybe we can save each other." The church erupts. Marcus's mother is on her feet, her voice shrill with indignation. "This is absolutely inappropriate. Someone remove this man immediately." 2 of the groomsmen start moving toward David, their faces set in expressions of righteous intervention. But Pastor Williams raises his hand, a gesture that carries surprising authority. "Wait." He looks at David with an expression Emily can't quite read. Confusion, yes, but also something else, something like recognition. Marcus himself has stopped at the door. He's turned back, his face pale, his eyes fixed on David, with an intensity that Emily notices even through her shock. And in that moment, she sees something she's never seen in Marcus before. Fear, not anger, not offense, not the embarrassment of a scene being made at what was supposed to be his wedding. Actual fear, the kind that makes a person's pupils dilate and their breathing shallow. "Who are you?" Marcus asks, and his voice trembles. David doesn't answer him. He's still looking at Emily, waiting, offering something she doesn't understand but can feel the weight of. And Emily realizes that everyone in this church has been looking at her all day, but this is the first time someone has actually seen her. Emily's voice comes out smaller than she intends, barely more than a whisper that somehow carries in the expectant silence. "Why would you do this?" It's not gratitude. It's not rejection either. It's genuine confusion, the kind that comes when the world stops making sense according to the rules you thought governed it. Men like David, invisible men, working men, men whose presence is acknowledged only when something needs cleaning, don't interrupt weddings. Don't offer themselves as replacements for successful, handsome men like Marcus. Don't look at women like Emily with anything other than polite indifference. David takes another step closer, close enough now that Emily can see the details of his face. There are small scars on his hands, the kind that come from years of manual labor. His eyes are brown, creased at the corners, and they hold something that makes her chest tighten. Not pity, not desire, something quieter and more complicated. "Because I know what it's like to be treated as if you're not enough," he says simply. "And I know what it's like to watch someone destroy themselves trying to become whatever they think will finally make them acceptable." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She thinks of the diets, the endless cycles of restriction and failure, the apologetic way she's learned to exist in spaces, making herself smaller even as her body refuses to cooperate. The gratitude she felt when Marcus first asked her out. The disbelief that someone like him would choose someone like her. "You don't know me," she says, but her voice lacks conviction. "I know you come to evening prayer every Wednesday," David replies. "I know you sit in the last pew on the left side, and you always leave $1 in the donation box even though you think no one notices. I know you mouth the words to the hymns, but never sing out loud, like you're afraid of taking up too much space even with your voice." Emily's face burns. These small observations, these tiny pieces of herself she thought were private, laid out like evidence. She wants to deny them, but she can't. They're true. All of them. Jessica, still standing beside Emily, speaks up. "This is insane. Emily, you don't have to listen to this, he's just some..." She pauses, searching for a word that won't sound cruel but settles on stranger. But Marcus's mother has found her voice again, sharp and cutting. "Richard, Thomas, please escort this man out. This is a private ceremony, and he has no right to be here, much less to..." "I have every right." David's voice doesn't rise, but something in it makes the groomsman hesitate. "I work here. I've been here longer than most of these people have been coming to Sunday service, and I'm not going anywhere until Emily tells me to leave." Marcus finally moves from the doorway, walking back toward the altar with quick, agitated steps. His composure, always so carefully maintained, is cracking. "Emily, don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know anything about us, about our relationship." "Your relationship?" David turns to face Marcus directly for the first time, and the temperature in the church seems to drop. "You mean the one where you proposed to her after your business partner's wife mentioned that being unmarried was hurting your image? Where you scheduled the wedding for exactly 6 months later because any longer would look suspicious?" Marcus's face goes from pale to flushed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know you've been paying for her gym membership," David continues, his voice still calm, still measured. "Not because you care about her health, but because you needed her to lose weight before the wedding photos. I know you've been telling her the dress needed adjustments when really you were hoping she'd shrink into it. I know that 3 weeks ago you told your mother that you were handling the situation and that everything would work out one way or another." The church has gone completely silent. Even the phone cameras seem frozen. Emily feels the floor tilting beneath her feet. "How?" Marcus's voice cracks. "How could you possibly know that?" David reaches into his uniform pocket and pulls out a small, battered notebook. The kind that costs $1 at any convenience store. "I clean the church offices. I empty the trash cans. And people like you never think about what they throw away, or who might see it." He opens the notebook and Emily can see pages filled with handwriting. Neat. Methodical. Dates and times and conversations documented with the precision of someone who knew this moment would come. Pastor Williams steps forward, his face troubled. "David, if you've been collecting private information..." "I've been collecting evidence," David interrupts. "Because I watched Emily come here every week for a year, getting smaller in every way except the one that mattered to him. I watched her apologize for existing. And I knew that if I didn't do something, if I didn't speak up when it mattered most, I'd be just as guilty as everyone else who saw what was happening and said nothing. Emily's hands are shaking. She looks at Marcus, really looks at him, and sees the truth written in his face. The guilt, the calculation, the cold arithmetic of a man who tried to build a life on a foundation of other people's insecurity. "Is it true?" she asks him. Her voice is steady now, stronger than it's been all day. "Was any of it real?" Marcus opens his mouth, closes it, opens it again. The pause is answer enough. And in that moment, Emily understands that David isn't a stranger at all. He's the only person in this church who's been paying attention. 3 days pass before Emily can bring herself to leave her apartment. The video has already spread across social media with the viral velocity of public humiliation. Someone titled it, "Groom says no to plus-size bride, then janitor steps in." The thumbnail is a freeze frame of her face at the moment Marcus pulled his hand away, her expression caught between hope and the first recognition of devastation. The comments are what she expected. Half of them call Marcus shallow and cruel. The other half agree with him, saying he dodged a bullet or suggesting Emily should have taken better care of herself. A few call David a hero. Most call him delusional. Everyone has an opinion about her body, her worth, her life. Jessica has called 17 times. Emily's mother has called 32. She hasn't answered any of them. She sits on her couch in sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, eating cereal directly from the box, watching her own humiliation play out in endless loops across her phone screen, each view counter climbing higher, each share spreading her pain a little further into the world. On the 4th day, there's a knock at her door. Emily considers not answering. But something about the knock, quiet, patient, not demanding, makes her get up. She checks the peephole and sees David standing in the hallway, still wearing his work uniform, holding a manila envelope in one hand. She opens the door but leaves the chain lock engaged, creating a gap of 4 inches between them. "How did you find where I live?" "Church directory," David says. "You filled out a contact form when you started volunteering." "I'm sorry to come uninvited, but I thought you should see something before it gets buried." Emily wants to close the door, wants to tell him that whatever heroic gesture he thinks he's making isn't welcome, that she doesn't need a savior, that she just wants to be left alone to process her humiliation in private. But curiosity wins. She closes the door, unhooks the chain, and opens it fully. David doesn't try to come inside. He simply hands her the envelope. "I found this 2 years ago," he says. "I wasn't sure what to do with it then, but after what happened at the church, I thought you deserved to know." Emily takes the envelope. It's old, yellowed at the edges, with a date written in pencil on the outside. March 15th, 2021. More than a year before she even met Marcus. Inside is a letter, handwritten on expensive stationery. The handwriting is feminine, precise, the kind taught in private schools. Emily recognizes the letterhead immediately. It's from Marcus's mother's personal collection, embossed with her initials. The letter is addressed to Marcus. Emily reads it standing in her doorway, aware of David waiting patiently, not watching her face, but giving her the privacy of his averted gaze. "Dearest Marcus, I understand your frustration with your father's ultimatum, but you must see his perspective. The partnership agreement is contingent upon presenting a stable, family-oriented image. Your lifestyle, the parade of inappropriate women, the social media presence that suggests instability, is jeopardizing everything we've built. I've given this considerable thought. What you need is not a wife you love, but a wife who is grateful, someone who won't question, someone who will understand that this arrangement benefits her far more than it benefits you, someone whose own insecurity will keep her compliant. I've identified several possibilities. Women who are lonely, desperate, or sufficiently damaged by social rejection that they'll accept the terms without demanding authenticity. The key is finding someone whose self-worth is low enough that she'll consider herself lucky just to be chosen. This needn't be a permanent sacrifice. Once the partnership is secured and the appropriate image established, arrangements can be made. Marriages end all the time, but they must begin first, and they must appear genuine. Think of it as a business investment. You've made harder choices for lesser returns. With love and concern for your future, Mother Emily reads it twice, then a third time. Her hands are shaking so badly the paper rustles like dry leaves. "Where did you find this?" Her voice sounds distant to her own ears. "In the office trash," David says quietly. Marcus had crumpled it up, thrown it away. I almost didn't unfold it, but something made me look. Emily's mind is racing backward through her relationship with Marcus. The way he approached her at a hospital charity event, complimenting her volunteer work rather than her appearance. How he seemed to seek her out specifically, as if by design rather than chance. The proposal that came exactly 5 months later, quick enough to seem passionate, but calculated enough to meet a timeline she didn't know existed. "Why didn't you show me this before?" Emily asks, and there's accusation in her voice now. "Why did you let me get all the way to the altar?" David meets her eyes, and she sees genuine regret there. "Because I wasn't sure. I told myself maybe I was reading too much into it. That maybe they'd changed their minds, that maybe the relationship had become real, even if it started as strategy. I wanted to believe people were better than they are." He pauses. "I was wrong to wait. I'm sorry." Emily looks down at the letter again, at the casual cruelty written in elegant script. Someone whose own insecurity will keep her compliant. The words cut deeper than Marcus's rejection at the altar because they reveal the architecture of her humiliation. She wasn't rejected for who she was. She was chosen because of it. Chosen specifically because her wounds made her easy to use. "There's more," David says, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his phone. "After the wedding, people started sending me messages. Other women, 7 of them so far. They all dated Marcus briefly in the year before he met you. They all fit the same profile." He shows her the messages, women describing similar patterns. Love bombing followed by subtle criticism. Promises of acceptance paired with suggestions for self-improvement. And then sudden, cruel rejection delivered just when they'd become most vulnerable. "He was practicing," Emily says, the realization settling over her like ice water. Finding the right approach, testing different types of women to see who would be most manageable. David nods. "And when he found you, someone kind, genuine, already carrying enough self-doubt, he knew he'd found what his mother's letter called the perfect candidate." Emily closes her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she sees herself 6 months ago, beaming when Marcus proposed at that restaurant, crying happy tears, texting everyone she knew because someone had finally chosen her. She sees herself as they saw her, a problem to solve, a box to check, a business investment with a built-in exit strategy. When she opens her eyes, David is still standing there, patient and solid. "What do I do with this?" she asks. "Whatever you need to," David says simply. "Keep it. Destroy it. Make it public. That's your choice to make, not mine." But they both know the real question she's asking isn't about the letter. It's about everything. About how to keep existing in a world where your worth is constantly being calculated by people who've already decided you're not enough. Emily doesn't sleep that night. She sits at her kitchen table with the letter spread out before her, along with printouts of the messages David showed her on his phone. 7 women. 7 stories that mirror her own, with variations only in the details. Different restaurants, different promises, same underlying equation. Find someone vulnerable, offer them validation, extract what you need, discard when convenient. By sunrise, she's made coffee 3 times and drunk none of it. Her phone continues its relentless buzzing. Jessica has escalated from calling to texting. Please just let me know you're okay. I'm worried. Her mother's messages are more demanding. You need to come home. We need to talk about this. You can't just hide. But the message that makes Emily's hand freeze over her phone comes from an unknown number at 6:47 a.m. We should talk. There are things you don't understand. I can explain everything. Marcus, reaching out as if explanation could somehow rewrite what happened, as if understanding his reasoning would make the humiliation hurt less. Emily deletes the message without responding. At noon, David knocks again. This time, Emily opens the door immediately, already knowing it's him by the quiet, patient quality of the knock. I brought something else, he says, holding out a small cardboard box. I wasn't sure if I should, but I think you're ready to see it now. Inside the box are photographs, old ones, the kind printed on glossy paper, edges worn from handling. The first shows a younger David, maybe in his early 30s, standing beside a woman in a white dress. She's beautiful in a conventional way, slim, blonde, smiling at the camera with the confidence of someone who's never questioned her place in the world. Her name was Rachel, David says softly. We were married for 4 years. Emily looks up at him, confused. I don't understand. What does this have to do with, I was different then? David interrupts. I worked in finance, wore expensive suits, had an office with a view. I was the kind of man people respect for all the wrong reasons, because I had money, because I looked successful, because I fit the image of what success is supposed to look like. He pulls out another photograph. Same couple, but something has changed. Rachel is thinner in this one, her smile tighter, her eyes carrying shadows that weren't there before. I didn't know she was sick at first, David continues. She hid it well. The cancer, I mean. By the time we caught it, it was already advanced. The treatments were brutal. She lost her hair, lost weight, lost the version of herself that the world had always valued. Emily's throat tightens. She can see where this is going, can feel the shape of the story before he tells it. My colleagues started treating me differently, David says. Not openly cruel, just distant, uncomfortable. One of them actually told me I should focus on my career because these things have a way of resolving themselves. He meant I should wait for her to die and move on. He pulls out a third photograph. In this one, Rachel is in a hospital bed, skeletal, hooked up to machines. David sits beside her, holding her hand, and the look on his face is something Emily recognizes. The exhaustion of someone who has learned that love, real love, is often indistinguishable from grief. I quit my job, David says. Sold the house, liquidated everything to pay for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. When she died, I had nothing left except debt and the understanding that everything I thought mattered, the career, the image, the success, was worth exactly nothing when measured against actual human value. He meets Emily's eyes. I took the job at the church because it was simple, honest. No one pretends to be anything other than what they are when they're scrubbing floors. And I've spent the last 6 years watching people like Marcus move through the world, calculating worth based on appearance, trading in human beings like their assets to be managed. When I saw you with him, I recognized the pattern. I saw Rachel before she got sick, when people valued her for all the wrong reasons, and I saw myself back when I didn't know any better. Emily's vision blurs. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand that speaking up, making this public, fighting back, it's going to cost you, David says. People will call you vindictive. They'll say you're bitter because he rejected you. They'll find ways to make you the villain in a story where you were the victim. And the comfortable thing, the easy thing, would be to accept the apology Marcus is going to offer, take whatever settlement his lawyers propose, and disappear quietly. He pauses, letting the weight of his words settle. But if you do that, he continues, 7 other women learn that silence is safer than truth. And the next woman Marcus targets, or the next man like him, they learn that this strategy works. That people are too afraid of judgment to fight back. Emily looks down at the letter again, at the clinical cruelty of its language. Someone whose own insecurity will keep her compliant. She thinks about the woman she's been for the past 6 months, apologetic, grateful, shrinking herself in every way possible to fit into the space Marcus allowed her. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she admits. You are, David says with certainty. You've already survived the worst part. Everything else is just deciding whether you want to survive quietly or survive loudly. Emily's phone buzzes again. Another message from Marcus. Emily, please. My lawyers want to offer you a settlement. We can make this all go away. You can have peace. Peace. The word tastes like surrender. She looks at David, at this man who gave up everything that society values to hold on to something society doesn't understand how to measure. And she makes a decision that feels less like courage and more like the absence of any other acceptable choice. What do I need to do? She asks. David pulls out his phone. There's a journalist I know. She specializes in stories about institutional manipulation and personal exploitation. She's fair, thorough, and she doesn't back down when powerful people start making threats. Emily takes a deep breath. Call her. The journalist's name is Catherine Mills, and she arrives at Emily's apartment 48 hours after the initial call. She's in her mid-40s, dressed in practical clothes that suggest someone who prioritizes function over impression, carrying a leather bag worn soft with years of use. Her handshake is firm, her eyes sharp, but not unkind. I've already spoken with 4 of the 7 women David mentioned, Catherine says, settling into Emily's living room with a notebook and recording device. 3 more have agreed to go on record. What Marcus did to you wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pattern refined over time. Emily sits across from her, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that's gone cold. What happens when this goes public? Honestly, Catherine doesn't soften her answer. It gets ugly before it gets better. Marcus's family has money, connections, and a vested interest in controlling the narrative. They'll hire crisis management firms, dig into your past, find every mistake you've ever made, and magnify it. They'll paint you as bitter, opportunistic, someone who can't accept rejection gracefully. So why do it? Emily's voice is small. Because the truth matters, Catherine says simply, and because silence is how people like Marcus keep operating. Every woman who stays quiet makes it easier for the next victim. Over the next 3 days, Catherine conducts extensive interviews. She speaks with Emily for hours, recording every detail of the relationship from the first meeting to the moment at the altar. She examines the letter from Marcus's mother with the care of someone handling evidence in a criminal case. She contacts the other women, building a timeline that reveals the deliberate, calculated nature of Marcus's behavior. On the 4th day, Marcus's legal team makes their move. The letter arrives via courier at 9 a.m., delivered in a heavy cream envelope embossed with the logo of Whitmore & Associates, one of the most expensive law firms in the state. Inside is a settlement offer, $250,000 in exchange for Emily's silence, a non-disclosure agreement that would legally prevent her from discussing any aspect of her relationship with Marcus. and a signed statement acknowledging that the wedding cancellation was a mutual decision based on incompatibility. "It's a good offer," Jessica says when Emily calls her. That's enough money to start over somewhere new. You could leave all of this behind." But her mother's response, when Emily tells her about the settlement, is different. "They're trying to buy your dignity," she says, her voice tight with an anger Emily rarely hears. "They're putting a price on your silence because they know what they did was wrong." Emily stares at the letter, at the neat rows of legal language designed to erase her from Marcus's narrative, to make her complicit in her own erasure. That evening, Marcus himself shows up at her door. He looks different than he did at the church, smaller somehow, despite being the same physical size. His expensive suit is slightly rumpled, his usually perfect hair showing the tracks of anxious fingers run through it repeatedly. He's alone, without his mother or his lawyers or his groomsmen forming protective barriers. "Can we talk?" he asks, and there's something in his voice that might be genuine remorse or might be carefully practiced vulnerability. Emily considers closing the door. But she wants to hear what he has to say, wants to understand what possible explanation could make sense of what he did. She lets him in, but doesn't offer him a seat. "I made a mistake," Marcus begins, and the words sound rehearsed. "I was under a lot of pressure from my family, from the business partnership, from expectations I didn't know how to handle. But that doesn't excuse what I did to you. You chose me because you thought I'd be grateful enough to accept anything," Emily says flatly. "Because your mother told you to find someone whose insecurity would make them easy to control." Marcus flinches. "You saw the letter." "I saw the letter. I talked to the other women. I know this wasn't about pressure or mistakes. It was strategy." "It started that way," Marcus admits, and for the first time he sounds genuinely tired. "My mother laid out the plan, and I told myself it was just practical. That marriage was a business arrangement anyway, and at least this way I'd be choosing someone who wouldn't demand too much. Someone who'd be happy with what I could offer." "And then?" Emily prompts, because she can hear the unfinished thought in his voice. "And then I got to know you," Marcus says quietly. "And you were actually kind, actually good. You made me laugh, made me think about things differently. There were moments when I forgot it was supposed to be an arrangement, when I thought maybe—" He stops, shakes his head. "But by then I was too far in. My mother kept reminding me of the plan. My father kept pushing about the partnership timeline, and I convinced myself that you were better off not knowing, that what you didn't know couldn't hurt you. Until you stood at that altar and decided it could," Emily says. Marcus meets her eyes, and she sees something genuine there. Shame, yes, but also the dawning realization of someone who has finally understood the magnitude of what he's done. "I panicked. In that moment, looking at you in that dress, knowing all those people were watching, I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't keep lying." "So you told the truth in the cruelest way possible," Emily says. "You humiliated me in front of everyone rather than having the courage to be honest earlier." "I know." Marcus's voice breaks. "I know what I did, and I know the settlement offer looks like I'm trying to buy your silence. But Emily, if this story goes public, it destroys everything. The partnership, my career, my family's reputation. My mother is already having health issues from the stress. My father is threatening to cut me off completely. And you want me to protect you from the consequences of your own choices," Emily says. "I want us both to move on," Marcus says desperately. "You take the money, start fresh somewhere new. I deal with my family privately. Nobody else has to get hurt." Emily thinks about the 7 other women, about the next woman Marcus or someone like him might target, about the choice between comfortable silence and uncomfortable truth. "Who gets hurt if I stay silent?" she asks. "Who pays the price for your fresh start?" Marcus doesn't answer because they both know the truth. His comfort would be purchased with her erasure, and the cost would be borne by every woman who comes after. "I can't help you," Emily says finally. "I can't save you from yourself." Marcus's face hardens. "The article comes out, and my lawyers will make your life hell. We'll find everything, every embarrassing moment, every mistake, every unflattering photo. We'll make you wish you'd taken the money." "Maybe," Emily acknowledges, "but at least I'll still have my voice." Catherine's article goes live on a Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. The headline reads, "The Wedding That Wasn't: How One Man's Calculated Cruelty Reveals a Pattern of Exploitation." It's thorough, devastating, and meticulously documented. The letter from Marcus's mother is reproduced in full. 8 women are quoted by name, their stories forming a damning mosaic of deliberate manipulation. By noon, it's the top trending topic on 3 social media platforms. By evening, 2 major news networks have picked it up. Emily's phone doesn't stop ringing. Journalists requesting interviews, producers pitching documentary ideas, strangers sending messages of support or vitriol in equal measure. Marcus's crisis management team responds with a statement that's been focus grouped to death. Mr. Pritchard deeply regrets the pain caused by the unfortunate end of his relationship with Ms. Chen. However, the characterization of events in recent media coverage is inaccurate and misleading. Mr. Pritchard looks forward to setting the record straight. But the record has already been set. The other women have started speaking publicly, their collective testimony forming a pattern too consistent to dismiss as coincidence or misunderstanding. 3 more women have come forward with similar stories. A former colleague of Marcus's publishes an essay about the workplace culture that enabled his behavior. Marcus's father releases a terse statement distancing the family business from his son's personal choices. The church where the wedding was supposed to happen releases its own statement, announcing that it's reviewing its policies around event rentals and background considerations. Pastor Williams gives an interview expressing regret for not recognizing the warning signs earlier. And through it all, Emily watches her private pain become public property, dissected and debated by people who will never know the full weight of standing at that altar. 2 weeks after the article publishes, Catherine calls with unexpected news. "The church wants to offer you something." Pastor Williams reached out. "He'd like you to come speak, not about Marcus specifically, but about recognizing manipulation in relationships, about trusting your instincts when something feels wrong." Emily's first instinct is to refuse. The thought of returning to that building, to that space where her humiliation was witnessed by hundreds, makes her stomach clench. But something else stirs beneath the fear, a small, stubborn ember of defiance. "I'll do it," she says. The gathering is scheduled for a Sunday evening, positioned as a community conversation rather than a formal service. Emily expects maybe 30 or 40 people, the kind of modest turnout for an uncomfortable topic. Instead, she arrives to find the sanctuary filled beyond capacity. Every pew is occupied. People stand along the walls. The overflow room is streaming the event live. And in the front row, unexpected and somehow inevitable, sits David, wearing clean clothes rather than his work uniform, giving her a small nod of encouragement. Emily walks to the front of the church, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet space. She's not wearing a wedding dress this time. Just jeans and a simple blue sweater. Her hair is pulled back in a ponytail. She looks like herself, not the version she tried to become for Marcus, but the person she was before she learned to apologize for existing. Pastor Williams introduces her briefly, his words careful and respectful, then steps back. Emily stands where she stood 2 weeks ago, in almost the exact same spot. But this time, she's not waiting for someone else to decide her worth. "I don't have a speech prepared," she begins, her voice steadier than she expected. "I'm not sure I have wisdom to offer. I'm just someone who made the mistake of believing that being chosen was the same thing as being valued. She talks about the small moments of erosion, the comments disguised as concern, the suggestions framed as help, the way Marcus slowly convinced her that love meant constant self-improvement toward an impossible standard. She talks about the relief she felt when he proposed, the pathetic gratitude of someone who thought she'd finally achieved enough to deserve basic affection. I spent 6 months trying to become smaller, Emily says, and her voice cracks on the word. Not just physically, though that was part of it. Smaller in every way. Quieter, less demanding, more grateful. I apologized for taking up space, for having needs, for existing in a body that didn't match what other people thought I should look like. The audience is completely silent. Emily can see tears on some faces, recognition in others. And on the day of my wedding, standing at this altar, I thought the worst thing that could happen was being rejected, she continues. But I was wrong. The worst thing was realizing that I was never actually chosen at all. I was selected. Like an item from a catalog. Someone whose insecurity made me useful. She pauses, looking out at the sea of faces. Some she recognizes from the wedding, others are strangers. All of them are listening in a way that feels different from being watched. This is attention without judgment, presence without voyeurism. A man I'd never really noticed, a janitor who cleaned these floors and emptied these trash cans, saw what was happening before I did, Emily says, her eyes finding David. He paid attention when it mattered, and when everyone else was watching me be humiliated, he was the only one who understood it wasn't rejection I was experiencing. It was exposure, the revealing of a plan I never knew existed. She pulls out the letter from Marcus's mother, now laminated and preserved. This is what they wrote about me, about finding someone sufficiently damaged by social rejection that I would be grateful for crumbs. Someone whose insecurity would keep them compliant. The anger in the room is palpable. Emily can feel it like a shift in air pressure. I'm sharing this not because I want your pity, Emily says, but because I want you to recognize the signs. In your own lives, in your friends' relationships, in the patterns of people around you. Manipulation doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like concern. Like help, like someone who's offering you the acceptance you've been desperate for. She folds the letter carefully. I'm still learning how to exist without apologizing, how to trust my instincts, how to believe that my worth isn't determined by who chooses me, but by who I choose to be. The applause, when it comes, feels less like celebration and more like solidarity. Emily steps back from the microphone, her legs shaking, her heart pounding, but something fundamental has shifted. She's no longer the woman who stood silently while her dignity was negotiated away. She's someone who chose to speak. 3 months after the article publishes, Emily stands in the parking lot of St. Margaret's on a Wednesday evening, watching the last light drain from the sky. She's been coming back to evening prayer, slowly reclaiming this space that was once associated only with humiliation. The congregation is smaller on Wednesdays, mostly older parishioners, a few people seeking quiet refuge from busy lives, and David, who still works here, still cleans the floors and empties the trash with the same steady care. The media storm has passed. Marcus and his family settled quietly with 2 of the women who threatened legal action. The business partnership his father was so desperate to secure fell through when the senior partners decided the association was too damaging to their reputation. Marcus himself has largely disappeared from public life, his social media accounts deleted, his presence reduced to occasional sightings that generate brief flurries of online commentary before fading again. Emily's life hasn't transformed into a fairy tale. There was no triumphant ending where everything suddenly became perfect. She still struggles with the internalized voices that tell her she's taking up too much space. she still catches herself apologizing unnecessarily, shrinking in small ways before remembering she doesn't have to anymore. But there are differences too, real ones. She started therapy with a woman who specializes in trauma and self-worth, working through layers of damage that existed long before Marcus entered her life. She's reconnecting with friends she'd distanced herself from during the relationship, people who never questioned her value and are patiently waiting for her to stop questioning it too. The job at the non-profit where she volunteers offered her a full-time position coordinating their community outreach programs. It doesn't pay as much as she needs, but it pays enough, and the work feels meaningful in ways her previous administrative job never did. And David has become something she didn't expect. A friend. Not a romantic interest, not a savior, just someone who understands what it means to rebuild yourself after watching your life collapse. They have coffee once a week, sitting in the small cafe near the church, talking about everything and nothing. He tells her stories about Rachel, keeping her memory alive through the small details that defined their relationship. Emily tells him about the woman she's trying to become, someone who doesn't need permission to exist fully. Tonight, after the prayer service ends, David finds Emily in the parking lot. He's changed out of his work uniform into jeans and a worn flannel shirt, his keys in hand, heading home after another shift. "You did good in there," he says, referencing her participation in the responsive reading. "Your voice is getting stronger." Emily smiles. It's true. She started singing during hymns, letting her voice join the collective sound instead of mouthing words silently. Small victories. "I've been thinking about something," Emily says, leaning against her car. "That day at the wedding, when you stepped forward and said you'd marry me. Were you serious?" David considers the question carefully, the way he considers most things. In that moment, yes, I would have stood there and said the words and meant every one of them. Not because I was in love with you, I didn't know you well enough for that. But because I recognized something in you that I'd lost in myself for a long time. What was that? The capacity for genuine feeling, David says. You were standing at that altar, being destroyed, and you were still present, still feeling everything. Marcus had numbed himself to the point where he could calculate cruelty and call it practicality. His mother had turned manipulation into an art form. But you were still raw, still human, still capable of being hurt because you were still capable of genuine connection. Emily feels tears prickling at her eyes. That makes it sound like a good thing, being vulnerable enough to be destroyed. It is a good thing, David says gently. Not the destruction part, but the capacity to feel deeply, to risk being hurt, to stay open even when the world gives you every reason to close down. That's not weakness. That's the only thing that makes any of this worthwhile. They stand in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as other parishioners exit the church, exchange quiet goodnights, drive away into their separate lives. What happened to Marcus doesn't feel like justice, Emily admits. He lost some opportunities, faced some consequences, but he's still fine, still wealthy, still insulated by family resources. It doesn't feel proportional to the harm. It rarely does, David acknowledges. Justice in stories is clean. Justice in real life is messy and incomplete. But you're standing here, 3 months later, still existing, still showing up, still willing to be vulnerable. That's not nothing. Emily thinks about the woman she was 6 months ago, so grateful to be chosen that she would have accepted anything. She thinks about standing at that altar, experiencing the worst moment of her life in front of hundreds of witnesses. And she thinks about who she is now, not healed, not finished, but fundamentally changed in ways that feel like progress. I got a message yesterday, Emily says, from one of the other women Marcus dated. She said reading the article gave her the courage to leave a relationship where she was being treated the same way. She thanked me for speaking up. How did that feel? Terrifying, Emily admits, because it means what happened to me mattered. It means I'm responsible for using my voice wisely. It means I can't just fade back into comfortable invisibility. Would you want to? David asks. Emily thinks about it honestly. The invisibility had been comfortable in its way, safe, requiring nothing except her silence and acceptance. But it had also been a kind of death, the slow erosion of self until nothing remained except the shape other people needed her to be. No, she says finally. I wouldn't. David nods, understanding without needing elaboration. He unlocks his car, then pauses. You know what I think the real love story is here? What? Not about who you marry or who chooses you, David says, but about choosing yourself. Deciding you're worth fighting for even when it's hard. Even when it costs you comfort or safety or the approval of people who never really saw you anyway. Emily watches him drive away, his taillights disappearing into the evening traffic. She stands in the church parking lot, the same space where her life fractured apart, and feels something she hasn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly, not the triumphant resolution of a story concluded, but something quieter and more durable. The sense that she's finally, slowly, learning how to occupy space without apologizing for it. She gets in her car and drives home through streets that look the same as they always have, but feel different now. Because she's different. Not better, not fixed, not transformed into someone whose pain has been redeemed by a convenient narrative. Just someone who refused to stay silent. Someone who chose dignity over comfort. Someone learning, day by difficult day, that her worth was never contingent on being chosen by someone else. It was always there, waiting for her to recognize it herself. Emily's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. How many times have we stayed silent when speaking up would have cost us comfort? How many times have we chosen the safety of invisibility over the risk of being truly seen? Standing at that altar, facing public humiliation, Emily could have accepted the settlement, taken the money, and disappeared into the quiet erasure that powerful people offered her. Instead, she chose something harder. She chose her voice. And in doing so, she gave permission to countless others to recognize the manipulation in their own lives, to trust their instincts when something feels wrong, to understand that being chosen is meaningless if you have to destroy yourself to remain chosen. The real tragedy isn't that Marcus left her at the altar. The real tragedy is that Emily, like so many of us, had learned to be grateful for crumbs. She had accepted that love meant constant apology, endless self-improvement, perpetual shrinking to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold her fully. What would you have done in her place? Would you have taken the settlement and moved on? Would you have exposed the truth knowing it would cost you peace? Would you have found the courage to stand in that church again and speak? Or would the weight of judgment have kept you silent? These aren't easy questions, and Emily's answers weren't perfect, but they were hers. And sometimes, that's the only victory that matters. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that your worth is not determined by who chooses you but by who you choose to be, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that reveal the uncomfortable truths we all need to face. Leave a comment telling us what you would have done in Emily's place. And remember that speaking up is never as simple as it sounds. But silence has a cost we don't always recognize until it's too late.